Hello and welcome to the Palsy Podcast with me, Ciaran Fitzgerald. I'm a playwright, screenwriter and podcaster from South Wales, and seeing as March is Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month, to mark it, I've decided to interview interesting people who have cerebral palsy from Wales and beyond every day in March. If you like this episode, please stay tuned for more throughout the month and like and share. Now enjoy this episode of the Palsy Podcast. Hello and welcome to episode 19 of the Palsy Podcast with me, Ciaran Fitzgerald. If you're tuning in for the first time, March is Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month in the UK, and this month I've decided to interview someone interesting who has CP every day in March, and I'm delighted to be joined today by John Wilkinson. Hi, John. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, Ciaran, you're right.
Very good, thank you. The first thing that I'd like to ask you is what I've kind of kicked off most of these with. Like, what was your experience as a child growing up with CP?
So, can I remember being a child? It's a long, long time ago now.
Can't be that long, John.
so, um, so I spent the first 10 years of my life in Harrogate because my dad had a newsagent shop, which we
Right.
lived behind and above, and as I'm sure people will have experienced a version of, there was a lot of kind of we would regularly go to the child development centre at Harrogate Hospital, and you would have a mixture of sort of occupational therapy and physiotherapy, and I suppose I was very lucky in that it was never we never made a thing of it at home. It was
Mm,
never a big thing, um, and when I was 10, my my I've got two siblings, a brother and a sister, and my brother was
mm,
born, and we my mum and dad decided that we needed more room, so we moved out
mm,
to my grandparents' farm towards Wetherby.
right.
Um, so and very lucky got to grow up on a farm, and sort of it kind of and I yeah, and we still did a lot of stuff in Harrogate, went to school in Harrogate, that kind of thing.
Were
Um,
you able to get involved in the physical side of farming and helping out on the farm?
no,
Um,
I wish I had. What I'm trying to think what I did. I always say I would have loved to because my dad's a trained farmer as well. But no, not really. I mean, my grandpa would take me on tractors and
mm,
when you were smaller or a bit more mobile, you could be thrown about anywhere,
yeah.
and that was no, it was good fun, good fun. And I was also able to, like I had we all had bikes and stuff, so I
Yeah.
managed to get I had a bigger sort of trike that I could go around on. We
Mm,
also fundraised for a couple of electric chairs that meant, you could go around and you could do outdoorsy stuff.
mm. And having that freedom to move around independently to explore as a child means so much, I think. I remember when I was younger, I used to use a rollator and, having a trike, like being able to move so much easier, so much faster, made a big difference to me. So what was school like for you? What was your experience at school?
It's a really interesting one because I loved primary school. Didn't have a great time at secondary school. And I think but I understand, well, I have an understanding of that, if that makes sense. You, we all, when we get to teenage, we've got our own stuff going on. So you had like a friendship group, some of which moved from primary to secondary with you, and then people started going through teenage years, and you all drifted apart, and it was harder in that sense to kind of maintain and do a lot of the same things that other people did, and and I had what we managed to do. I've always gone to mainstream school because my mum fought.
I was
Which,
going to ask you, did your parents have to fight to get you into a mainstream school?
yeah. I mean, I don't know the details exactly, but my mum, as I'm sure a lot of people have, the like mum and dad pushed for so much, and I was always the first. I was the first kid in a wheelchair to go to the primary school that I went to, and I was the first. I was the first person in a wheelchair to go to King James's School and in Knaresborough. And what was interesting about that is when we were going, you got to go around and sort of interview and meet different schools, and there were a couple of schools in Harrogate that just wouldn't entertain it, and we were just wouldn't entertain the idea of and because of all the adaptations and everything they had to make, this was way before all the EDIB stuff comes in, and it was a little bit more, it was a little bit less thought of, shall we say. And then, but we were very lucky in that the head teacher of the King James's in Knaresborough was very keen to meet us and meet me. And it was one of those cases, and I'm sure everybody's experienced this. He talked to me as opposed to talking around you, which
that shouldn't be a rare occurrence, but so often it is, because I've had experiences of people talking to the person I'm with, but when you feel that you're being centered, you're being spoke to, you're being understood, that is so important.
I don't know if you've ever read, it still boils my blood every time it happens, because so, within reason, I can we can hold conversations, and and there's a brilliant book by Christopher Brookmeyer, and I'd never heard it articulated as well before. But there's this chapter in, I think it's A Big Boy Did It and Ran Away, and it's basically a satirical crime novel where it's two friends in Scotland who, one grows up to be work a menial job, and the other grows up to be an international assassin. But there's a chapter in that book where the friend who's the menial job guy has been taken into the police station, has been interviewed about this incident with his friend, and the policeman's doing this to him, and he uses let me try and get this quote right. It's something like the incomparable frustration of being patronized by a stupid person.
Yes. That's such a good phrase, because that's exactly what it is.
Because half the time, even if you say that to somebody, even if you tell them, please don't do that, I've got X, Y, and Z qualifications, it doesn't make a blind bit of difference. They can't get it past their own. They can't compute it.
And then I don't know if you're the same, but then having experienced those situations, when you go into situations where you've got to talk to people, I feel like sometimes I've got to prove myself. I've got to prove that I'm intelligent or worthy of having that conversation with.
I suppose my version of that is a self-consciousness around my speech and how we kind of and you realize that it's not a problem, but you go in with these, you go in with these. They can't use my words. You go in with these worries and these preconceptions that people are going to read this and they're going to judge this, and whereas actually half the time we're all right.
I think so. I think most people. I think attitudes have improved, but I do think there's still a bit that needs to be done. Like, but I do think that we do. I certainly tend to overthink things in that regard. I'm going to move on slightly. Like, so when did you first get interested in theatre?
So I didn't do drama at school. I was always English orientated, partly because the drama department we had at school, again going back to the time when it was before all the EDRB stuff, it wasn't really that accessible. Like I could walk up, like our drama department was like right at the top of three flights of stairs, and I could have done that if I'd have wanted to. But at the same time, it was hard. So I ended up, not ended up. I did English literature and language as opposed to drama, and I left school genuinely not knowing what I wanted to do. And my form tutor was also the head of drama. It was a fabulous guy called Mike Garside. He's still alive. He's not dead. He kind of said, Have you had a look at there's a place called Bretton Hall, which now no longer exists, but for older listeners, it was an arts college in the grounds of the West Yorkshire Sculpture Park. And so I had a year out, and then I applied there to do theatre studies, and they changed the name of the course to theatre dramaturgy, and it was the first dramaturgy degree in the UK. And now we're familiar with dramaturgy now, but back then, sort of 2000-ish, we weren't. And I kind of went there and with no idea what I wanted to do afterwards. And when I finished, I did an MA at Leeds, and I was like, unless you're very lucky or you teach, it's very hard to get a job in that field. And I ended up getting a foot in the door job at York Theatre Royal on box office and went from there, really.
And then worked your way up from there. So, like, after uni, was it dramaturgy that you were interested in, or directing? What was the dream at that stage? Was it both? Like,
No, I think it was. No, I think it was. It was very much. It was very much dramaturgy. I mean, I didn't train in directing at all, and back then I was a little bit shyer than I am now, and I kind of asked. All my mates back then were like stage management, so and I used to go to the pub with them, and eventually one of them said to me, "Why don't you just have a word with our artistic director?" And because you think artistic directors are these sort of mysterious figures that hang around in turrets and don't speak to anybody, but actually there was a brilliant AD there who's up in Alnwick now called Damien Cruden, and he kind of, both him and the associate director sort of mentored me a lot, and kind of all the directing stuff I learned kind of by watching them and watching different people and writing to people and going and sitting in a room, and when I heard a word that I didn't know, I'd have a notebook with me and I'd scribble loads of stuff down, and I think a lot of the learning that you get, it takes a while to bed in and evolve. And And so there was no intention of directing. I never set out to direct. I just was offered the opportunity to do it, and it went well. That's the
And just to, you spoke about dramaturgy. Had you written as well? Were you interested in writing plays, or was it just the dramaturgy and script editing side of it?
I suppose I wasn't very good at putting myself forward, and I used to write for pleasure. I still write for pleasure, but more sort of novelty stuff than plays. So it was mainly a knowledge of existing plays and kind of going from there. Although the more you go on, the more I'm always quite jealous of directors who have been actors and ones that have written and directed, because you learn different sets of skills.
Do you have a set process when you're directing something, or does it depend what the project is, what the piece demands?
That's a really fun question. I saw it in your list and I was like, oh, that's good. I could talk about this for all day. I think we grew up in a time when directing was very much anti-blocking. Like there's people like Mike Alfreds and those kind of practitioners who don't believe in it. They kind of want an actor to find it themselves, which to a point, yes, I get, and I read all those books and I like bought into that theory, and I tried. You evolve your own process and you kind of try different things, and the sort of democracy of that was exciting, but then as you evolve, you sort of, to use a weird analogy, it's like in gaming, when you kind of when you get experience points, you skill up and that kind of thing. There's levels of things that you don't initially. One thing, for example, that's really hard to get is transitions and how transitions work. And I think blocking is one of them, because I got to a point where I did one show where I tried to do the anti-blocking thing, and because I didn't have any because I hadn't got solid enough foundations in fallback, you get into problems. So I think now what I do now, the first thing I would do still, I suppose, is have a really good conversation with the actor or the actors, and sort of, it's funny we're doing this around CP, because I do a speech at the beginning and I kind of say, this is what CP means for me. This is what it means in terms of stamina and speech and sort of that was really good. I'm gonna Google this because I can't. Let me see what my physio gave me a brilliant phrase, and let me just find it while I'm talking to you. It's like to do with anyway. It's to do with muscular control.
Right.
I'll find it by the end of the episode. And so I have that conversation with an actor, and then I would say to them, so I've told you what I need, or you do it with the design team as well, and you would say, this is what I need. Like, what do you guys need? How do you like to work? And for example, on this last play we've done, Robin Simpson, the actor, bless him, was like, well, just tell me if it's rubbish and I'll do it differently. And it's like, that's exactly what you want to hear. But I think where I then go to guard against that anti-blocking thing is I have a very rigorous blueprint in my head, because I found prior to all this anti-blocking philosophy, I'm going to sound like a football manager here, but there's lots of older directing books that have rules, that old rules that we were never taught. Like there are only a certain number of positions on stage. There's your obvious ones that like you're upstage, downstage, center stage, but within those 9 spaces, there's different positions within that, and it was all, to get a bit boring and historical, it was initially designed so that before any of this, before creative access was a thing, people could go to the theatre if they were hearing impaired, and they could read the story by the positions on stage.
I didn't know that at all. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's so it's so clever. And so what I tend to do now is kind of go in with a version of that, so I can sketch out what we want, and then we want to break down, and we want to do, if we want to do a bit of talking into something, we can then do that. It's like, that is where I'm at the moment, I suppose, in terms of process.
And is integrated access an integral part of that process? Or is it something you're still? Because I think it's difficult, right? I think it's something that in the industry we're all kind of learning and developing, and which is going to be a continuous thing to integrate access within performances. Is that something you look to do in your work?
It is a really interesting one, because funnily enough, I just did a load of training with last Friday with Birds of Paradise.
Okay.
And just for York, and they were talking into creative access a little bit, and obviously I did that bit of work with Ramps on the Moon.
Yes.
So nearly 10 years ago now, which made me shocked to be the other day. And creative access was a big part of that. And I think I always really, it's a learning journey for me, really, because there is an assumption that because we're disabled artists, we know how to do that. But it's a very particular aesthetic. And there's also rights and wrongs. Like, do you try and do everything at once? Do you focus down on one element? And the whole language, the landscape and language is evolving all the time. Like I heard the term, sounds shocking, I'd never heard the term disableism until Friday. I'd heard the word ableism, but there's a distinction between those two was a new thing. So I think the conversations around access we're always learning, and we've got to. In terms of work that I've done with it, I think the only show that I've focused down on it was Winter, which was the Young Vic show, where we tried to do something interesting with audio description and sonically, where I worked with a fab actor called Maisie Greenwood, and Maisie is visually impaired, and we did a whole thing where half the stage was gravel and half the stage was carpet. So but you couldn't tell the difference until you stepped on it. So like visually all looked the same. So I think there was I saw an article this morning about a campaign that everything should be captioned, which is interesting. So I think the element that interests me about creative access at the moment is as it evolves, is there a way of evolving it that adheres to the can adhere more to what I would, this is probably badly phrased, but what I would like refer to as pure theatricality, in terms of when we use caption, for example, we're often reliant on video.
Yes.
And that's a choice, but it's also an intermedial choice in that you're mixing multimedia with live performance. What I'd be interested in finding is a way of I know there are certain artists, because Birds of Paradise were talking about it on Friday, who use analog methods of creative access.
Okay.
And I think that, for me, in terms of taste and my aesthetic, that would probably be where I'd be interested in looking at.
I've never even thought that to use those analog methods. That's really interesting. And please let me know what you discover, what develops.
I will, and I'm aware that it's such a nuanced conversation, because if we do want to use the technology exists and it's brilliant, but it's a way of, and you would obviously factor it into a design early on.
Yeah. And
But
it
is
has
there a
to,
way of capturing the liveness a bit more?
yeah, that's really thoughtful. Yeah. I'm gonna continue to think about that. That's a big question. I'm gonna move on slightly. So in Wales, we've just had the launch of a thing called Cries, which is the Welsh version of a thing called Ramps on the Moon. And you were an agent for change at Leeds Playhouse as part of Ramps on the Moon. Um, so first of all, what did your role involve?
Um, I mean, the great thing about that scheme was when I did it. I'm trying to think how many partners there were. I think there were 4 or 5.
Mm. There
There
were
were
there were five in Wales.
so there was Leeds, Birmingham, Stratford East, um, Nottingham. I want to say there was one more. I might have been Sheffield. I might be wrong.
Yeah.
Um, but what it was about was being being a constant presence in that organisation, and being an advocate for disability and access, for like front and back of house, production,
Mm.
everything, trying to hit everything. And I think what they allowed you to do, which was, no, whether they allowed you to do it, but I kind of what I enjoyed about it was you were able to make progress in your own way. Like I would, there are lots of different ways of having the access conversation. You can be very activist and very sort of megaphone.
Yeah.
I think but there's a difference between. I think there's a difference between activism and advocacy, because I felt like the way I had to do it, I was a bit more. I tried to do it slightly quieter, in a slightly
Mm.
quieter way, and I think it depends on the culture of the building and the city. Like
Right.
I'm well, we have a Leeds postcode here, so I'm just about from Leeds. My mum's from Leeds, so Yorkshire, there are certain ways of doing things, and you kind of, and so I I progressed what I progressed, and other people did it in different ways, and I think that's the best thing about That's the best thing about that
And
scheme.
were the staff at the building receptive, and did they put things into place that you
Yeah, they were. We had a.
suggested?
I mean, I was trying to count. I think I was either the second or third agent for change they had because the artistic director at the time at Leeds Playhouse was James Brining, who'd
Right,
pioneered the idea of an agent for change up in Dundee,
right.
with Caroline Bowditch, and I think he did fully understood what it was capable of, and Leeds Playhouse has always been brilliant with its outreach and its creative engagement, and they had a massive department there who were, there was Al Ferris when it was there when I was there, but it was Sam Perkins before him, and they were really, they were real presence in the city, and they cared about it, and they kind of, they, I lost my train of thought. They, so there was like a designated access person there
Yeah.
who I sort of tag teamed quite nicely with, Maria Thelwell, who's now at Mind the Gap, and so
Mm,
it wasn't like you. It all begins with ethos, doesn't it? And whether
yeah.
like you've won, half the battle is getting people on side, and they were
Hmm.
already on side, so that was fine.
Made it easier for you going in there, and people being receptive to change makes the change easier and
Yeah,
develops the culture of that building, really.
yeah.
And you recently directed The Last Picture by the lovely Welsh writer Catherine Dyson. Can you talk a little bit about the play? Uh,
I was speaking to Catherine just before I came on to speak to you. Um,
oh,
yeah, yeah, she's wonderful. Um, I and you can claim her as Welsh as well. That's great.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely, absolutely, reclaiming you.
and so yeah, it was great. It was like it's a beautiful play, and we we had a really nice time. We've been it's been Yeah, I've been banging on about that play for about 3 years. I first encountered it as part of the RSC's 37 plays, and I would instantly my taste is sort of I love destroying literalism and trying to like get into the sort of mainland Europe vibes. So
Okay.
I mean the un the sort of layman's way of describing it, I like making weird shit, and like
Yeah.
and and it's a very clever concept. It's a very clever conceit, um, and yeah, we just had a nice time.
Can you talk a bit about what the play's about and what the concept is?
Yeah, of course I can. It's going to sound weird, I saying we had a nice time when I talk about this because the content of the play isn't nice at all. So it's basically um, Catherine. It's really hard to define what genre of work Catherine makes because you could quite easily compare it to like performance storytelling or Chris Thorpe or something like that. But she kind of exists in her own little space, um, and so the play is about it's a one person play told from the point of view of an emotional support dog called
Right.
Sam. So any age, any gender can play Sam.
Hmm.
And Sam describes the events of taking a year 9. He's a support dog to a class of year 9 school children, taking them to a Holocaust exhibit. Well, you pretty quickly learn that it's a Holocaust exhibit, and all the pictures, the conceit of the play, apart from Sam telling the story, which operates as a kind of buffer to the sensitivity of some of the content. The conceit, there's very few stage directions in the play, apart from you don't see any pictures.
Right.
You're not allowed to see any pictures. They're all based on real pictures that are at the Imperial War Museum, but you don't see any of them. So it's reliant on the audience to use their imagination to create the play, more so than normal. It's just really clever, and I mean, Catherine is of Jewish heritage now. Sort of, she had relatives that escaped Germany, but she also wanted to explore the convention of writing through the eyes of a dog, and it's just really clever.
I haven't come across that before as a perspective, and I think it's a really interesting thing to look at it from a dog perspective. Like, has the tour finished now? Is there anywhere that people can see it in the future?
Well, the tour finished in Guildford a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
We did. What did we do? We started in New York. Then we went to Manchester at home. Then we went to Bristol Old Vic. Then we went to Yvonne Arnaud Theatre in Guildford, and it's finished now. But we're hopeful that it will have some kind of we'll see it again somewhere, because we were really pleased with it, and it's really the other thing that's important to say about it is it's not preachy. It kind of gives you a very objective. It places you in a very objective spot where you can make your own comparisons with maybe stuff that's happening now, maybe stuff that we need to guard against, and so keep your eyes peeled. Let me say that.
Thank you, John. I will do. I'm really disappointed that I missed it. And you talk about making also drama through the lens of disability, even when the subject matter isn't directly about disability. So what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I noticed you sent me that. You've been reading my agent's biography, haven't you?
Maybe not. Who knows?
What did I mean by that? I suppose I just mean.
I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot. You
No,
can
no, no,
say
you're not. No, don't worry about it at all. I think the one thing you were talking about growing up with CP earlier, and I think the one of many things that it gives you is a degree of otherness and a degree of like sitting outside of the crowd, and sort of and I think that otherness, we should talk about it in terms of perspective, and I think there is, if you go back through the plays I've directed, there is something about, there isn't, I'd like to think it was subconscious, but it mightn't be, which is worrying. But there's a subconscious thing about a lot of the plays deal with individuals in sort of othered situations and sort of on the periphery of things. And I think that is what I think that's what it's given me. And the more I the more I kind of crystallize my views on theatre, if you like, and what it can do, the more I think I get very, very bored, and it's gradually starting to creep in. People are gradually starting to get this, but I get very, very bored with people banging on about stories, because stories are very, like, marketing departments like to talk about stories a lot because it's an easy way in. It's an easy way, and it's what stories have become. Not to get very boring and academic on you, but what stories have become is shorthand for language, structure, and marketing campaigns. And I think what theatre particularly should be trying to do, it's about imagination, and it's about exercising our imagination. And like we've just talked about the last picture. And I said this a lot in the course of that. Broadly speaking, you think about a spectrum of imagination and genres. If you're reading a book allows requires slightly arbitrary number, but a book requires 100% of your imagination to be used in conjuring it. Film and TV, you go smack to the other end of the spectrum, because they're like, you've got a camera pointed where it wants you to look. It tells you tell you where to go. Often you get music that tells you how to feel. So you're kind of using 5 to 10% of your imagination. Theatre should exist, or does exist, somewhere towards the arbitrary, again, 75% to 70%. So it's like, how can theatre differentiate itself from, it shouldn't try and compete, because
from film and TV, especially if you want to get an audience in, get an audience away from Netflix and Disney Plus. What is gonna draw them to the theatre? And it's that live experience, isn't it?
It's also dangerous, because I talking about being in Manchester. So the content of this play was obviously quite heavy. There was the night that I saw it, because obviously when you're on tour you don't go on it, you don't go to every night. The night that I saw the play, there's a family came in. It was an older teenager, and he was with 3 of his family.
Yeah.
And he was obviously really keen on theatre, because he was proper, leaning forward, engaged. His family were not theatre goers. And I say that because as soon as the actor came on, they started laughing at really inappropriate moments. And it was really weird. And the particularly because obviously the content isn't, there's moments of lightness in it, but it isn't designed to be funny. And it really threw the actor. And we were talking about it afterwards. And what you realise is that, I think what that was is those people not knowing where to put their emotions when they're experiencing live stuff. So I think there's a danger in that if we get too far down the line of, being on a sofa, theatre needs to help people engage in that different way.
Connect with their emotions more directly and gain a level of emotional understanding, maybe. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of there's not like a screen. You can't turn it off. You can't to an extent you can't lose focus. There's that awful thing in TV now, which is called second screen, and writers will get and writers will get notes saying, "Oh, it's not second screen enough," and it's like, oh well, Yeah.
That really annoys me. Like, if you're watching someone watch something
Yeah.
and like, hopefully this encourages people
Yeah.
to maybe give it a go. Like, and what do you enjoy most about working on new writing, and what draws you to a piece of new writing? What makes you think, oh, that's a piece I really want to work on? And what excites you?
I think there's two things. I think one is to do with the one is to do with the one is the nature of what you're being asked to do, and one is the quality of work that you're being asked to make. And what I mean by the nature is you're helping a writer develop something from dot. And I think
Mm,
there is a really interesting thing about judging like variance and just letting them. It's really hard, isn't it? You're a
mm,
conduit, and then you've got to shape um their thing, as opposed to if we're working on an extant piece of um text,
yeah.
there is a danger that you will put so much of yourself in it that become conceptual and like
Mm,
become like a sort of some kind of um calling card. Um, and then the other thing is when I say quality of the work, I hate, and it's easy to tell what I don't like than what I do. I think we've got into a point where so much work um, can be um, preachy and give an audience a position. Whereas, again, to refer back to the last picture, what that did really brilliantly was set us in a position where there wasn't an opinion offered, but it was given like we were given the opportunity to form our own ideas about subject X, Y, or Z. And I think that's much more exciting than somebody somebody saying to an audience, right, this is on you, this is your fault, this is what you have to solve.
I agree completely. I don't like being preached at when I go to the theatre, but if I can form my own opinion,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
that's yeah. I think maybe we've lost a bit of that in theatre. Um, but John, it's been lovely talking to you. I've got one last question, which is how I tend to round these up. What is one thing that you wish people knew about cerebral palsy?
Um, I'm going to cheat and I'm going to refer back to Chris Chris Brookmeyer quote: "The incomparable frustration of being patronised by stupid people." Like we can, just just because just because a person presents in a certain way doesn't mean you can't talk to them.
Yeah, like regardless, visible, like yeah, make an effort to people,
Don't
engage with
don't
people.
don't assume. I suppose if you want to like an easy sum up.
Yeah, that's really good. Don't make assumptions. Everyone's different and engage with. Yeah, completely
Yeah.
hear what you're saying. It resonated so much with me what you said earlier. Thank you, John. It's been lovely to meet you. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
It's all right. Thank you for asking me.
And yeah, hopefully we can work together on some stuff in the future as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Thank you all for listening and watching and joining me on this episode of the Palsy Podcast. Please stay tuned for more episodes every day throughout March. On the next episode, we're staying with the arts a bit, speaking to actor Lizzie Annis on the next episode. She is currently in Under Saltmarsh, which has been on Scout Atlantic and has performed at the Old Vic and the West End. So please stay tuned for that tomorrow. But for now, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from John. Goodbye. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Palsy Podcast with me, Ciaran Fitzgerald. I want to thank my guests for joining me, and I hope that you'll stay tuned for the next episode and more throughout March. Thank you.